Right after Stalingrad, you could feel it. Even from thousands of miles away. That something had cracked inside the German war machine. For the first time, the myth of invincibility was gone. The army that had stormed across Europe like a lightning bolt had just been chewed up and spat out. In the frozen ruins of one Soviet city. An entire Sixth Army wiped out. Hundreds of thousands of men gone. And suddenly the question wasn't, can Germany win? Quote. It was, how much longer can they even survive this? Quote. But here's the thing about Hitler. He didn't think defensively. Ever. Retreating, regrouping, playing it safe. That wasn't in his vocabulary. What he wanted wasn't stabilization. He wanted a knockout punch. Something big. Something dramatic. Something that would prove to the world that Germany was still terrifyingly powerful. And when German planners looked at the map, one spot jumped out immediately. Kursk. If you picture the front line at the time, the Soviet defenses bulged outward in this giant curve. What military guys call a salient. It stuck out like a sore thumb. Which meant it could be attacked from both sides at once. Pinched. Crushed. Trapped. On paper, it looked perfect. The idea was simple and brutal. Hit from the north. Hit from the south. Two armored claws snapping shut. Inside that pocket would be hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers. Tanks. Artillery. Supplies. Gone in one massive encirclement. If it worked, it wouldn't just be a win. It could reset the entire Eastern Front. German generals were actually excited. For the first time since Stalingrad, they had a plan that felt like the old days. Fast. Aggressive. Classic blitzkrieg. Speed was everything. Strike before the Soviets knew what was happening. Punch through thin lines. Keep moving. Don't give them time to breathe. There was just one problem. Hitler didn't want to attack yet. He started obsessing over new weapons. Brand new Panzer tanks. Massive Tiger tanks. Bigger guns. Thicker armor. He kept thinking. If we just wait a little longer, if we just add a few more divisions, if we just make this force even stronger, it'll be unstoppable. So instead of launching the offensive in the spring, when the ground was firm and the Soviets were still recovering, he delayed. And at first, it didn't seem like a big deal. A few days. Maybe a couple weeks. But wars don't pause just because one side hesitates. While the Germans sat there polishing their new tanks and waiting for the perfect moment, the Soviets were watching. And they knew exactly what was coming. See, Soviet intelligence wasn't blind. They had scouts, intercepted communications, even spies feeding them information. They could practically see the German build-up happening in real time. So instead of being surprised, they prepared. And when I say prepared, I mean obsessively. Entire armies of civilians and soldiers started digging. Trenches stretching for miles. Then more trenches behind those. Then more behind those. Anti-tank ditches deep enough to swallow vehicles whole. Barbed wire. Bunkers. Hidden artillery nests. And minefields. Thousands upon thousands of mines. Then tens of thousands. By some estimates, over 1 million mines buried in the soil. Just waiting. Every extra day Hitler delayed meant another layer of defense. Another gun. Another trap. The battlefield slowly transformed into something that didn't even look natural anymore. It looked mechanical. Like the earth itself had turned into a weapon. German generals grew nervous. They kept urging, we need to attack now. Surprise is fading. Quote. But Hitler kept pushing it back. More tanks. More time. More perfection. It's almost tragic when you think about it. Because the very thing that had made Germany so dangerous early in the war, speed and shock, was being sacrificed for caution and overconfidence. By the time Operation Citadel finally launched in July, the moment was gone. There was no surprise. No weak point. No quick breakthrough. Instead of smashing into unprepared defenders, German tanks rolled forward straight into the most heavily fortified battlefield in human history. All because one man believed waiting would make him stronger. But what he was really doing was giving his enemy exactly what they needed most. Time. And time, at Kursk, turned out to be deadlier than any tank or gun Germany could ever build. When the attack finally came, it didn't feel like the lightning strike Germany had built its reputation on. It felt heavy. Slow. Like trying to sprint through mud. At dawn, the horizon lit up with artillery. Thousands of guns firing at once. The ground shaking so hard it felt like the earth itself was cracking open. Then the engines started. Deep, metallic growls rolling across the fields. Panthers. Tigers. Panzer IVs. Steel monsters inching forward in tight formation. Commanders convinced that once these machines got moving, nothing on Earth could stop them. This was supposed to be the moment Germany took back control of the war. One massive punch. One clean breakthrough. But almost immediately, things felt wrong. Instead of racing across open ground like they had in France or early Russia, the tanks crawled. Every few hundred meters. Boom. A mine. Tracks blown off. Smoke rising. Crews scrambling out. Engineers rushing forward to clear paths while artillery rained down on them. And that was just the first defensive belt. Then came anti-tank guns, perfectly hidden, firing from tree lines and trenches. Soviet shells slamming into German armor from angles they didn't even see coming. Every time the panzers pushed forward, another wall of resistance appeared. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a maze. And every turn was a trap. Radio chatter started getting tense. Units reporting losses. Delays. Entire companies stalled out before they'd even reached the main Soviet line. Commanders who expected to be miles ahead by noon were still fighting for the same patch of dirt. Hours later. The whole idea of blitzkrieg depended on speed. Overwhelm the enemy before they could react. But you can't blitz through a minefield. You can't lightning charge through 6 layers of trenches and guns. So instead of this clean, sweeping maneuver, the Germans got sucked into something they hated most. A grinding war of attrition. Exactly the kind of fight the Soviets were built for. And then came Prokhorovka. If you've ever seen footage or paintings of Kursk, this is probably the part you recognize. Thousands of tanks from both sides crammed into a relatively small area. Dust and smoke everywhere, machines practically colliding at point-blank range. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't strategic chess. It was chaos. German crews who were trained for long-range precision suddenly found Soviet tanks charging straight at them, so close you could see the other driver's face. Shots fired from 50 meters. 20 meters. Sometimes less. Tanks ramming each other. Burning wrecks turning the fields into an inferno. It felt less like modern warfare and more like 2 medieval armies smashing together with steel. Monsters. And despite all their fancy new technology, the Germans weren't breaking through. They were bleeding. Slowly. Constantly. Every day, more tanks lost. More experienced crews gone. The kind of losses Germany couldn't easily replace anymore. Still, there was this tiny sliver of hope. Some commanders believed if they just kept pushing one more day, just a little farther, they might finally punch a hole through the Soviet lines. And then, right when everything hung in the balance, Hitler made another decision. Far away from the front, news hit him like a slap. Allied forces had landed in Sicily. Now there was a new threat. A new front opening in the south. And suddenly, his attention snapped away from Kursk. Instead of committing everything to finish what he started, he panicked. He began pulling elite SS Panzer divisions out of the battle. Some of the best, most experienced units Germany had. Imagine being a German commander on the ground. You've spent days fighting through hell. You're exhausted. Your men are dying. But you still believe reinforcements are coming. That one final push might change everything. And then the order arrives. Stop. Withdraw units. Send them to Italy. Just like that. Momentum. Gone. Those divisions weren't just numbers on a map. They were the spearhead. The punch. Without them, the attack didn't just weaken, it collapsed. The Soviets felt it instantly. And they didn't hesitate. They counterattacked with everything. Fresh reserves. More tanks. More artillery. Wave after wave. Now it was the Germans on the defensive. Scrambling, retreating, trying not to get surrounded themselves. And that's the moment history quietly flipped. Because after Kursk, Germany never truly attacked in the east again. Not like this. From that point on, it was retreat after retreat. Back across Ukraine. Back across Poland. All the way to Berlin. All because the one offensive that was supposed to restore their power got strangled by hesitation. And then abandoned halfway through. It's wild when you really sit with it. The biggest tank battle in history. Millions of soldiers. Entire nations hanging in the balance. And the turning point wasn't just firepower or bravery. It was one man. Far from the battlefield, making one decision that drained the last bit of momentum away. Not a dramatic explosion. Not a heroic charge. Just a quiet order to pull back. And with that, Germany's last real chance to win in the East slipped through their fingers forever.